Super, good to see you this evening. Hope you can hear me and see me okay. So we're going to start in a kneeling position on top of some height, a bolster, blanket, anything that you can get hold of, as we can't always have exactly the right yoga props around us. So let's adapt and modify to our needs. So good to see you. We're going to be going through the Niyamas now. So last term we were looking at the Niyamas, the observances. Hi, Amanda. And this half term, we've got 6 sessions to move through the Niyamas. So there are 5 Niyamas, and we'll come together to kind of collate those ethics or those observances on the 6th session. So tonight's session is to do with Sauca in the Sanskrit. That means cleanliness. And obviously we can take that into an external sense of cleanliness. So it's worth just looking around in the space that we're in. And I always have to sort of acknowledge whether I've got a cup of tea that I'm going to kick over later, and just allowing for the space to be fairly uncluttered. But more importantly, in terms of this sense of cleanliness, I'd like us to think about that in terms of an internal cleanliness within, in terms of the mind stuff, the chitta vritti. I've got lots of translations here in front of me, but perhaps most helpfully, when we're thinking about that sense of internal cleanliness, we think about the mind, and we think about the sense of granthis, which are blockages or knots or energetic tightenings within the body that we're looking at releasing. So a lot of these asana and postures are to do with allowing for the energy to flow freely through the body. So external cleanliness pertains to the body and area of practice. So in the yogic tradition, they would have suggested cleaning with water and clay, cow dung, and cow urine. We obviously are probably not going to be using cow urine to clean the space in the modern day. But internally, this is to do with ingesting pure substances. So in terms of food, organic foods, ideally. And so recommending food stuff that doesn't agitate and stimulate the system. And it specifies alcohol, because obviously alcohol is something that agitates the system, incites rajas and tamas, to do with the Ayurveda. So internal cleanliness consists of purifying the mind of all contamination. So with that in mind, we're going to be working with purifying the system by creating heat around our core, our navel center, through some movements involving navel radiation. Some of these are going to be quite strong. So if you've got anything going on here, hiatus hernia, any surgical intervention, or if you're tender around here for whatever reason, you'll want to be taking this fairly easy. So coming into that sense of posture now, we'll stop talking so much. Drawing your senses into the body, beginning to notice the movement up from the sit bones all the way up to the crown of the head. So we're sitting on some support here, and the pelvis may feel like it's in a neutral position. It's neither anteriorly tilted or posteriorly tilted. It's somewhere in between. It should feel fairly comfortable. Bringing the hands to the thighs and closing the eyes if that feels comfortable. By all means, if closing the eyes brings any sense of agitation, just gently gaze down towards the mat in front of you. Beginning to notice how the breath feels tonight. So a little bit of breath awareness to start with. I invite you to bring one hand to the heart center, one hand to the belly. And this can be really useful just to really touch base with how we're feeling. And notice the movement moving in, either around chest or belly region as we breathe. As we inhale, there's a sense of expansion within the torso. And as we exhale, the hands may draw together. As the diaphragm arches up, the hands move together and everything kind of reduces in towards that navel region, that navel center, the Manipura, the Hara. Inhaling, expansion moves in, the diaphragm draws down, air rushes in. Exhale, sense of drawing inwards, of release. Now we begin with this breath, this healing breath, inhaling to allow for the diaphragm to draw down. Exhaling, allowing for the diaphragm to jellyfish up into the region of the rib cage. And you may already know that this process of moving and allowing for the diaphragm to move properly on the breath, as opposed to being stiffened and rigid and breathing into the top of the chest, which we may do throughout the day, by allowing for the diaphragm to move in this way, we're giving the heart a massage. And that's really crucial to our hearts. You know, the heart doesn't necessarily restore itself like the cells do. Breathing in this way can be one of the most useful tools in your toolkit in terms of health and well-being. Breathing here. A few more times, breathing through the nostrils to increase the nitric oxide within the system. And noticing what happens within the body as we breathe in this way. Releasing through the shoulders, the facial muscles, the eye sockets, the forehead. Now, as we gather our attention on the inhale, we're going to bring the arms up and overhead, beginning to mobilize the spine with a little bit of rotation. Exhaling and allowing for rotation to come in as we gaze over to the left side of the body. The right hand touches base with thigh, left hand comes down behind the bolster. Inhaling to find space up through the vertebra. Exhaling, belly draws in, a little bit of rotation. Inhaling, we're going to lift up through the side seams of the body. And exhale, easy rotation to the other side, bringing that hand down onto the thigh, the right hand around the back of the bolster or the feet, wherever that comes to. Inhaling to find height through the vertebra of the spine. Exhaling, allowing for the belly to draw inwards. Inhale, arms move up overhead. And we're going to come into a little forward fold here, either resting on the forearms in a little sphinx, maybe bring the forehead down, or resting down with a hand. So we're coming into a forward fold, which is instantly calming to the nervous system. Now, when Alistair Shearer talks about Sauca or cleanliness, he says, while cleanliness is of course aesthetically desirable and necessary to maintain the optimal functioning of the nervous system, the word also describes a mind which is clear, uncluttered, and straightforward. Such clarity comes from samadhi, which is awareness at its most simple and unsullied. So samadhi being that movement towards meditation, that peak meditation experience where everything sort of drops away. Coming into a sense of the uncluttered mind, the clear mind. And padding through the hands to the center, coming back into your upright position, breathing here. Now we're going to come into Nadi Shodhana, our alternate nostril breathing practice at the beginning of the practice tonight. Utilizing the right hand, whether you're left-handed or right-handed, always coming to the right hand and gathering the left hand onto the elbow. We're going to begin to breathe through the nostrils. You just acknowledge whether your nostrils are clear, as they may not be at this time of year. We're going to close the right nostril, inhaling through the left and exhaling through the left. We're then going to close left nostril and breathe through the right nostril, inhaling here, exhaling here. Now, if there's any mucus or blockage taking place here, do get hold of a tissue. You know, feel like you can just snort out the mucus. It's not a problem. And we're going to begin on the left side, inhaling through left nostril. Closing left nostril, opening through right to exhale. Inhaling to follow. Closing nostril, opening on the other side to exhale down through the left nostril to the end of the exhalation. Finding an inhalation, inhaling the attention up to the third eye center, the forehead. Closing left nostril, exhaling through the right nostril. Followed by an inhalation. Closing right nostril, exhaling through the left nostril. In the most purest sense, we are clearing the nostrils here. Inhaling. Close, open, exhale. And if you're familiar with Nadi Shodhana, with your pauses, your kumbhakas at the end of the exhalation, pause there before inhaling. Finding the peak, closing, opening, exhale, down through the left nostril. We're going to do 10 rounds of this, inhaling, acknowledging that your pace may be different to mine as we swap the fingers, exhaling, followed by an inhalation. Coming into that sense of equal of sama within our Nadi Shodhana, alternate nostril breathing, exhaling. And here we are clearing the nervous system, inhaling, allowing for it to move into its parasympathetic nervous system state. And we're thinking about the autonomic nervous system, inhaling, closing nostrils, exhale. And by all means, if you are completely happy to move in and out of your Nadi Shodhana, allow my words just to kind of roll over you. It can be tricky to follow the fingering at first, inhaling through that same side. And exhale to the left side to drop that Nadi Shodhana, or of course carry on for a few more if that feels suitable to do so. Now, ideally, we would spend more time with that pranayama, but just notice how that feels, specifically around the front of the forehead. Is there a sense of maybe clarity? Now, that pranayama is really recommended for insomnia, for coming into a state of equilibrium, if you're feeling swayed by the winds or the vayus, if you're feeling discombobulated, to come back to that center, channel that shashuna. Now we're going to move into the shoulder girdle now. So get hold of your strap and get that strap into maybe the right side firstly. We're going to semaphore the arms around the back line of the body. Dropping the strap, but not getting hold of it yet because we're looking for some fluidity before we move into Gomukhasana or cow-faced arms. And of course, if we don't have a strap like this, we can use a dressing gown strap. We can use the t-shirt to grasp hold of some cloth as we dangle that strap down the back line and gather with the other hand. Look for a sense of release through the shoulders. It can be very common for the shoulders to feel particularly tight within this bind. Coming back to the breath as you inhale into the belly nice and deep, allowing for the belly to soften, the hara to expand, and exhale to release. That sense of release around the shoulders, the jaw, the belly. We're going to gaze over to the left shoulder to touch into the sternomastoid, which is a really great sign of showing us where our nervous system is at. A little bit of acknowledgement of whether there's any stress or tension within the sternomastoid, which impinges on the vagus nerve. And then tilting the head over to the right side. And then as we bring the gaze back through center, we're going to come into a little forward fold. Now this forward fold can be as gentle or as deep as you feel the need, but really observing what takes place as you tilt yourself forwards here. Spending some time in that forward fold before inhaling without rushing it, feeling through all of that variation available before releasing the arms out. So we bring the arms into like a wingspan, thinking about the connection of the shoulder blade all the way out to the middle finger, drawing the shoulder blades together. And we're going to come into our Garandasana eagle arms. The right arm comes over the left arm. The shoulders, the elbows cross over one another, and we bring the back of the hands together. It may be the case that it's available to bring the palms together after that, lifting up through the elbows here, feeling into the space in between the shoulder blades, the rhomboids, the trapezius. How does that feel? Lovely. And then dropping those arms, I'm going to open them out to the sides again, drawing the shoulder blades together, getting the rhomboids to engage, and then we're going to get hold of the strap for the other side. So bringing that strap into left hand, semaphoring the arm over, little sort of goddess stance here, bodhisattva. And I can't think which bodhisattva it is that brings the arms into that kind of position. Might be Kali, the goddess of destruction. And then bringing that strap to dangle. Catch hold of the strap and really pay attention to whether this side feels different to the other. I believe this is the side that doesn't necessarily create so much mobility for me, and that's because I've got a little bit of scoliosis in the spine. Breathing into this space, releasing through the shoulders. Exhaling and releasing through jawline, the TMJ. Exhaling to release through the facial muscles. And gazing over to the right shoulder. How's the neck feel? Oh, a bit gristly on my side here. And literally can hear gristliness taking place there. It's quite strange. And then gazing over to the left. Bring the gaze through the center. And coming into a little forward fold. Coming back to the breath. Coming back to that sense of interoception. When we can audibly hear the sound of the breath within, because we're tightening the glottis muscles around the throat. Breathing, releasing the shoulders. Coming up and out that forward fold with no rush at all. And releasing the lower arm and the upper arm. We can drop the strap to the side now, opening up that wingspan to bring our arms into Garudasana, eagle pose. Crossing the left arm over the right, bending at the elbows, bring the backs of hands together, and then bringing the palms together if they will allow for it. Again, releasing around the shoulders here, but you'll feel into the back line of the shoulders potentially as you lift up through the elbows. How does Garudasana arms feel today? Remembering to breathe around the belly region. Inhaling deep into the belly, exhaling here. Lifting up through the elbows. And then we're going to release those arms out to the sides, feeling into the shoulder blades, and bring ourselves into our tabletop. So you might like to remove your bolster, your support, wherever you were. We're going to come into our all fours position. Lovely. Make sure those hands are directly under the shoulders, remembering all the alignment cues from before, spreading through the fingers nice and wide to support the wrists. And as we take our attention down through the spine, thinking about the lengthening taking place from the crown of the head to the tailbone. So we're neither collapsing like this or bracing, we're somewhere in between. And the tops of the feet settle against the floor. We're going to exhale, allowing for the diaphragm to draw up into rib cage as we drop through head. Inhaling through neutral, unfurling, undulating through the spine. Exhaling, breastbone moves forwards, allowing for extension to come in through the thoracic spine more than lumbar. Inhale, peeling that tailbone down. Exhale into your fullermost exhalation. And then we're going to come back to neutral, but with that sense of posterior tilt through the pelvis. So we need that sense of stability here. We're going to create some circles within the hips. But firstly, as we exhale, drawing belly in towards spine, we bring right knee in towards nose or thereabouts. You come into a little flexion. And as we inhale, allow for the flared foot to move up towards the head and the sky. So we're exhaling, drawing belly in, knee draws towards nose. Inhale, spinal extension takes place, but just control how much movement's taking place within the lumbar. Exhale. The diaphragm draws up, more space to flex. Inhale. Diaphragm draws down, coming to a little spinal extension. We're going to take some scoops into the hips now, so external rotation, imagining you've got chalk on the knee and you're creating circles to the side of you. 3 in one direction, nice and slow, finding space within the hips, coming back in the opposite direction, and making any adjustments that you need to as we move into one side more freely, we're going to dump weight into one side. So you want to adjust that. It's really important before bringing that knee into a straight line. So we'll bring that leg out to the side. You might not be able to see that. So we're straightening the leg to the outer edge here and winging ourselves back into a sort of half child's pose and moving ourselves forward. So just exploring the inner groin, the line of the inner groin here. And then we're going to take that leg back in. So we're exhaling, other side, knee comes in towards nose, flexion, inhaling, bring that foot up towards the ceiling. So if you can see my profile, exhaling, knee towards nose, inhaling, feeling that length along the front line. Exhale, knee towards nose or thereabouts, inhaling, foot moves up towards the ceiling. Now we're going to scoop through the hips, again adjusting. So it's actually making our lives slightly more difficult, but there's more integrity of the alignment. You make sure that you're not dumping the weight into one side more than the other. Coming back through in the opposite direction, finding that external rotation. The glutes will be engaging quite naturally, observing how that feels. Lovely. Now we're going to set the hips back down into child's pose. Extending out through the arms here before we draw ourselves forwards into our almost upward facing dog, but then taking ourselves back. So we've got flexion as we move the hips back, inhaling, extension, dropping hips forward. So it's a release through the hips rather than any forcing action. Exhaling and inhaling to drop hips forwards. And you may come into an upward facing dog or thereabouts, thinking about the shoulder blades drawing together, stacking the shoulders over the wrists, spreading through the fingers. Notice how it feels to press down through the forefinger, the difference that makes. And then winging the hips back into our child's pose before we release ourselves back into our tabletop. Finding stability with that sense of navel core radiation, we're going to lift up through the right side, left knee, extending into bird dog, gazing down at the floor in front of us to lengthen through the neck and the head. So imagine someone's pulling with a rope. So I've got a little top knot where they would be pulling, lengthening down through the heel of the hand, breathing here. We're using the breath to support us. So as the breath moves into the navel, allow for the belly to open, and then on the exhalation to draw inwards. Now, if anything is moving into the lumbar, know that you can draw the tailbone down towards the mat. Breathing here and releasing hand and knee back down. Coming back to that sense of stability, inhaling, cross the line of the body, cross-crawling action here as we lift up through left hand and right leg. Again, making any adjustments that you need to draw the tailbone down towards the mat, protecting the lower back, very vulnerable area. Breathing here, finding that integrity of your alignment, acknowledging that the breath is here to support you, but we are building heat through the breath to hold this movement, and then exhale the hands back down. Now this time we're going to flow a little bit between the points. So inhaling to extend, exhale, gathering elbow and knee in towards the midline, drawing up into the belly region. Inhaling to lengthen, exhale, drawing knee and elbow together. Inhaling, reaching, exhale, and gather the limbs inwards and release them down. Inhale over to the other side, left arm reaches, right leg. Exhale, gathering knee and elbow together. Inhale, think about your core navel, the radiation that moves from that space on the breath. Exhaling to allow for that gathering inwards. Just acknowledge how your balance is today. And exhale to gather, gathering in. And then bring those limbs back down. Now we're going to touch base with a Kapalabhati Pranayama, skull shining breath. I'm just going to take myself back into a kneeling. You can do the same to observe how this is when we work with Kapalabhati. Again, we're thinking about the diaphragm movement here, which is why the breath and that awareness is really crucial. We're going to do 3 rounds of about 10 or 20, depending on how familiar you are with skull shining breath. The pranayama itself is a forced exhalation. You pump the belly inwards. The inhalation comes with a release around the belly where the diaphragm will relax down. If we can't relax the belly, come into a hyperventilation breath. So if that's you, just come back to that cleansing, healing breath that we started with in the session. I'll do 10 of these just so you can see that there is a response with the pump. So because my spine will be relaxed, it will move, and that's due to the diaphragm moving, essentially. So just to demonstrate, inhaling and exhaling quite freely, coming into all fours to help utilize gravity around the abdomen. And then I come into forced exhalation, allowing for a relaxed inhalation, then forced exhalation again. So hopefully you could see that because of the pumping action, my spine was moving. We'll try that together. Just acknowledge that this is a tricky breath. This is about building heat within the body. Breathing naturally in your all fours. And you're not doing a full exhalation. You're doing an exhalation that's quite a shallow exhalation, okay? So inhaling naturally and begin with a forced exhalation. Inhale. Exhale. So it goes something like that. And begin. When you've done 10, allow for a lovely long inhalation to come in. Breathe naturally. Notice how you feel before you come into another round of that forced exhalation. Release belly inhalation. Forced exhalation. Release belly on the inhalation. And to begin. One more round here, and I'm just going to observe forced exhalation, relaxed belly inhalation. So you've got like a sniffing. Can be quite a tricky thing to cultivate, particularly because we're utilizing the abdominal region and the movement of the diaphragm. If you're forcing the exhalation and forcing the inhalation, that's another pranayama called Vastrika, bellows breath. That's a slightly different thing. When you finish and you're in your all fours, I'd like you to just rock the hips back and bring the palms up to face the ceiling and observe how you feel. Kapalabhati, skull shining breath, kind of, would suggest a certain sensation. Just acknowledge how that felt. For some of us, that just brings in anxiety. And just acknowledge how that feels in your body, okay, without any sense of judgment. So we're going to move into a little forearm plank now. Just acknowledge your energy levels today. We're going to try it with the knees down firstly. So creeping the hands forwards, you'll notice my knees are on the blanket. We're coming into a position where the pelvis is off the ground, the knees are down. And you're coming into that sense of the forearm plank with your sense of navel region here, your core. Breathing here, utilizing the breath. How does that feel? And we're going to hold this as we're breathing, but make sure that you're not collapsing into your lumbar by adjusting the position of the pelvis. So that consideration of spaciousness from the crown of the head down to the tailbone could be really helpful, so we don't come into this kind of thing where you're just straining lumbar. Nice straight back. Now from this position, if you're feeling inclined to do so, you can tuck the toes under and lift up the knees to come into your forearm plank, acknowledging that the forearms are to be parallel. There is another position that you can come into here, which I'll just show you with the hands clasped together, and that makes it more secure. So you have that position to work with as well, utilizing the breath that supports us and creates stability. Breathing here. And it can be useful to think about drawing down through ankles and moving forwards through arms to build strength. Rocking to and fro. And when you're ready, of course, draw those knees in, and we're going to sink down into child's pose. The child's pose can be on the bolster in front of you to make sure that you have a sense of restoration, because child's pose is not for everyone the most relaxing position to be in. So if you need the height, bring the bolster in. And if you're not using a bolster, think about extending through the arms and have a little exploration of bringing hands together in Anjali Mudra, dropping hands to the back of the head, opening up the underline of the arms in a similar position to where we were with a bit of Gomukhasana or cow-faced arms here. Breathing here into your child's pose. Now from our child's pose position, I'm just going to move the blanket out of the way. We're going to wing ourselves forwards into Sphinx. So from the position that you're in, if you've got the bolster in front of you, you'll want to move that. We're going to stroke the hands out through in front of us, bring ourselves onto elbows and drop the belly down onto the mat. Again, the position of the arms are in that forearm Sphinx position, spreading through the fingers nice and wide, elbows directly under the shoulders, gazing down in front of you, and knowing that this final extension is fully secure and stable through the arms. There's a sense of pushing down and lifting up through breastbone, relaxing down through the body. You should feel like you can allow for the spine and the legs to feel like jelly as you wiggle the hips from side to side. Are you relaxed? This is as important, especially in our yoga practice. When we engage the muscles, we also want to release the muscles. Unlike in an exercise regime where you'd engage, and not necessarily learn to do the opposite, the relaxing side of things. Now we're going to draw the breastbone down to the mat to come into your little crocodile, resting cheek to meet hands. Your hands are folded on top of one another, and then bringing the gaze to the other side. Coming into our cobra now. So again, we have this sense of relaxation through the body, and there's something about prone that's inherently relaxing. Some of us may sleep in this position. Bringing the hands underneath the shoulders, thinking about length through the crown of the head, drawing the chin in towards breastbone, gathering the pelvis and the fronts of the feet down to the mat. We allow for that process of lengthening to take place to come into Bhujangasana, Cobra. Breathing here, and as you inhale, can you feel the belly push down towards the mat? As you exhale, maybe the belly draws inwards. So there may be a little undulation on the breath here. Just observing whatever is present before we gather the hands down underneath the shoulders and tuck and swing the hips back into our child's pose. Just for a moment, as we spread through the fingers, we're going to make our way into a downward dog. But I'd like you to think about engaging your mulla band, your pelvic diaphragm, or your pelvic floor. You will have heard one of those options before. Pelvic floor being the most prevalent suggestion of what's taking place within that region. It's the pelvic diaphragm. There's nothing floor-like about the pelvic floor. So as you exhale, I'd like you to think about a lift through the muscles of the pelvic floor or pelvic diaphragm. Now, this engagement of that region is known as a mulla bandha in yoga, or the pelvic lock. You're locking the energy there. So I'd like you to engage your pelvic floor on the exhalation. On the inhalation, I'd like you to release and allow for the pelvic floor to expand. So we're going to tuck the toes under, dropping into our downward dog, allowing for the haunches to move up towards the ceiling. But as we come into our downward dog, and I'm just going to come into a kneeling position to talk you through, we're going to think about that mulla bandha. So on the exhalation, we're drawing up through the pelvic floor. On the inhalation, there's a sense of flattening down. So if you've had children, you may feel more akin to understanding those muscles. And this may feel fairly new to you. So exhaling, when we exhale, we're utilizing respiratory diaphragm and the pelvic diaphragm at the same time. It's a pressurized system and you're allowing both of them to draw up. On the inhalation, you allow for both of them to draw down. Okay, from this space in our downward dog, we're going to aim to come into a forward fold. So padding the feet towards the hands rather, to come into Uttanasana at the front of the mat. A bend in the knees and a swinging of the arms down alongside the thighs. Like a chimpanzee, you feel grounded through the lower body and you can get hold of your elbows or indeed allow for the arms to swish and sway to the side, but drop through the head as well, so you can really allow for the spine to release downwards. We're utilizing gravity here. And we're going to swing from side to side, really feeling into the movement. Allow for the movement to come in. Before we come up into a standing position, we're bending the knees because we're coming directly into a bioenergetic standing position where the knees are bent. The hands are situated parallel to the ground, and you're imagining you're getting energy up from the ground here. Shoulders released away from the ears. We're going to come into Agnisara. In our Agnisara, it's like a pelvic tilt, but with the breath and the movement of the diaphragm. So to face you here, what we're going to do is we're going to flatten the pelvic floor down towards the ground on an exhalation. On an inhalation, we allow for the pelvis to move forwards, an anterior tilt, inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. Now this can again be very tricky to access the movement of the pelvis. Inhale, it can be helpful to bring the hands to the front of the hip points. Exhale. Tricky to know whether you can see what's going on here. Inhaling, rolling front of pelvis forwards. Exhale, flattening. So that's the action. Inhale, exhale. Coming into a forceful breath, inhaling, make sure the knees are bent. Exhale, forceful exhalation. Inhale, exhaling. And with this action, as you inhale, notice what the diaphragm's doing. Exhale, draw up through the pelvic floor diaphragm. Inhaling, exhaling, focusing your attention on the exhalation, drawing up through pelvic floor, tailbone tilts down towards the ground, moving between those points. And we're going to release this action, but it's still going to come in as we ground in through the left leg. We're going to lift up through the knee and scoop the leg out to the side. So we're creating circles. We've still got a bent knee on the left side. Bringing hands to hip points can be helpful. Scooping the knee up through the side and then taking the knee back. Scooping round. And I'm going to spiral myself forwards again so you can see what's taking place. Remembering to utilize the breath. So we're grounding through the left side. And then we're going to extend the leg behind, bringing the torso in line with the back leg, coming into a little lunge. Taking the weight into the left side, scooping that leg round, coming back to the breath, that sense of the interoception on the breath, Ujjayi breath, ocean breath. Now this time as you come back, you can come back into your lunge, but there's an opportunity to come into Virabhadrasana 3 as well. So depending on your energy levels, you can work with this in whatever way feels right for you. Scooping around into an external rotation, stepping back into a squat, or coming into Virabhadrasana 3, Warrior 3, on the breath, flowing in between those points. Now the leg is going to be tiring, potentially here. So we're going to move into Vrksasana. Now we've got the lovely external rotation. I'm just going to step around this external rotation. And when we come into our Vrksasana, you can come into that stabilizing position, moving down through the big toe, or you can bring the foot into the shin, or you can come into the position with the thigh. Just be mindful not to bring the foot into the knee. And we're not using any tweaking of legs. We're allowing for that sense of spiraling through the external rotation to take us into that position. Finding the hands at the heart space, releasing through the shoulders. Vrksasana tree. And acknowledging the energy. So are you swaying? In which case, your ankle will be getting some really great work to engage and help support and balance. Once you've found your balance with your drishti fixed on a fixed point, Lift up through the upper torso, the upper body, and blossom. Apologies, we've lost my hands. Feeling those shoulder blades, releasing down away from the ears. Finding that still point, utilizing the breath. So we're thinking about dropping the mind down into that midsection of the body, the hara, the manipura, that center of growth here. When we can drop our awareness down, so I have, because I'm so short, the ground is not so far away. So if those of you who are taller, think about dropping the energy down into the midline, to your navel, to find security, and then bringing the hands back down through the midline. Hands coming into the heart space, releasing the knee forwards, bring that leg down. Now you may want to shake the legs out here because you've been on the left side for a while. So we're going to ground down through the right leg now with a lot of suspension in the knees, and feeling the hip as it circles. There's a sense of the knee moving back. Bring the hands to hip points, or indeed you can bring hands to heart center, whatever works for you. Breathing on this movement, so it's a little flow. And then when you feel like you want to take the leg back, you can bring the arms into angles. So it's like a high lunge but with hands forwards, and then taking the grounding weight into the right side, scooping here. And you may feel some movement within the pelvis, or maybe it's a more isolated movement, but I'd like you to feel like you can free up around the hips here. Stepping the leg back, coming into that high lunge, moving with the breath. So it's a lot of play really taking place here. What is the potential of the movement here? You can come into your Virabhadrasana 3, your aeroplane, your warrior 3, whatever feels achievable for you today. Taking that leg back. The leg will begin to tire. If you come into your high lunge, make sure the knee isn't over the ankle but directly stacked, and then scooping that leg forwards. So I'm a little bit wobbly this evening, and then we're going to take this into Vrksasana, so I'll spiral around, finding that position, hands to heart center, or bring the leg into the thigh, or indeed the shin. Now, to find that sense of stability, a little bit of pressure and engagement through the feet can really help. So you'll notice the difference. I've got a foot that's switched off here, and then I have a switched on foot. When the foot's switched on, that helps engage everything, as well as the foot that's grounding through the floor, the footprint, that is engaged. We have a better time of finding balance, releasing through shoulders, and then opening up towards the ceiling, smiling if you're wobbling, releasing through shoulders. You can use support from anything, a wall, fireplace. Finding Vrksasana, tree pose. Utilizing your focal point, your drishti, and remembering about that center point within the capacity of your breath, your belly. And bring the hands, I'm swaying back down into the heart space, and releasing that leg, shaking out. So we're going to come into eagle now. So we're going to ground down through the right side, sinking down, so the pelvis sinks down. This is the first position to come into. We cross that left leg over the right, find the double wrap. Again, use a wall if you need to. Then we cross that wingspan over, so left side over right, back of the hands come together, or the palms. So we have this duality of movement taking place. So you're grounding down through tailbone, lifting up through elbows. Eagle, Garandasana. I'm very wobbly tonight. Breathing into that center point, your hara, your navel. I've come out of that early because that was hard work. So breathing into that core, that center. And if you've come out, we're going to come into the left side, bending through knees, crossing the right leg over the left, coming into a double wrap if that's available. sinking down, opening up the wings, crossing the right arm over the left arm. Elbows come together, backs the hands, all the palms lifting up through elbows, sinking down through hips. Fixing your drishti on something immovable. Breathing here, coming back to the breath that creates stability. Great. Sinking down a little bit more as you lift up through the elbows and releasing to the sides. So we can swing out that energy before we bring ourselves back down. So like starfish, that center point radiates from the middle and the limbs simply extend out from that point. We're going to step to the front of the mat and come back into our Uttanasana. We're then going to come into plank. You can put your knees down as well. So as we find the ground, we can bend the knees as much as we need to. We can extend out through the legs into tabletop or directly into our plank. If you're extending out through plank, come into that plank position. Or if you're coming into your tabletop, extend out through the foot, one by one, or bring both knees off the ground. But we're looking for a sense of support in the breath. And you know, in these sessions, if you need to come into your child's pose, bring the knees down and come into child's pose. Working within what is useful, what is beneficial, energetically, especially at the end of the day, it will help you to sleep. But by all means, if you're not feeling the plank, do not force it. Breathing into that negative space, remembering that we have that center point, that navel and that breath to support us. We're going to come down into prone, two options, knees, chest, chin, into prone, or Chaturanga Dandasana, in which case thinking about the fingers spreading as we bring elbows towards rib cage, finding our way down into that stick-like position. We're going to reverse this. So if you Chaturanga Dandasana down, think about that lovely long length from crown of the head, tailbone to heels, and reverse your Chaturanga Dandasana, or do that with knees, chest, chin, wherever you are, and then come into your downward dog. Lifting the haunches up towards the ceiling, extending through the spine, bending the knees, and find yourself in a rest pose. We're just going to be here for a moment to transition. So as you come into your downward dog, we're going to step the feet forwards into Uttanasana, bending the knees. And then as we bend the knees, we're going to sink the hips down. And this is where we need our strap. If you need to move to get hold of your strap, please don't twist into your knees. Coming into that position. So we're crouching on our feet. Now from this position, we're going to transition into Navasana, into boat pose. So as we bring the sit bones down towards the ground, can you bring the strap around the feet? And you might be familiar with this shape. So as we lengthen through the tailbone, the crown of the head, extending through the feet, the strap is around the base of the big toe. And again, thinking about that navel region. Exhaling, we can bend the knees, drawing the legs in. Inhale, lengthening. Exhale, drawing the knees in. Inhale. By all means, if you want to remove the strap and see what difference that makes, you can do so. Moving between those 2 points. Inhaling to lengthen. Exhale to draw the knees in. Inhaling and exhaling. Now, as you bring the knees in on the exhalation, I want you to think about allowing for the spine to flex. We're going to put the strap aside. We give ourselves a little bit of a hug. We're going to roll down onto our spines, if you can, to come into a semi-supine. Have a little exploration of coming down into semi-supine. And getting hold of the hands, we're going to clasp them around the back of the head. Okay, So the hands are now clasped around the back of the head. And with the feet directly under the knees, coming into Dvipadipitham. So as we peel the pelvis off the ground and move the vertebrae one by one off the ground, you come into your little bridge shape. Now, as we roll the vertebra of the spine back down again, we're going to lift the head in unison to gaze at the knees. Okay, so these are a bit like crunches, but with spinal mobilization. And as you draw the pelvis off the ground, moving up through the vertebra, the head drops. As you exhale, gazing at the knees, the head draws up off the ground. Moving between those points, allowing for the head to drop, peeling the pelvis off the ground, and exhaling to gather the head in towards, so you're gazing towards your knees. And then we're going to release one more time, exhaling. And this time we're going to release those hands out to the side in T shape and draw the knees in towards the chest to come into a spinal rotation. If you've got your bolster, we're going to bring the bolster over to the left side first and allow for Jatara Parivriti to come in, rolling the knees over to the side. Keeping that shoulder blade grounded, creating support so you can fully release down through the side body. Gazing at the right hand. So allow for that energy to flow through this lovely S shape of the spine. Breathing here. Allowing for everything to soften, everything to move into relaxation. Bringing the gaze up through center. If you're utilizing the bolster, getting hold of the bolster, popping it over the other side, and then rolling the knees over to the right side, gazing over to the left, keeping the shoulder blades grounded. If you're not using a bolster, you can just allow for the legs to splay over to the side. The angle of the legs will change the intensity of the rotation. So there's a little bit of exploration to what works for you there. Breathing here, bringing gaze back through center and rolling the knees in towards the midline. We'll find ourselves into Shavasana, extending the legs out, creating some support for the knees as we're looking for release around lumbar iliopsoas, allowing for the limbs to move outwardly from that navel center, creating support behind the back of the neck to lengthen the neck. If you've been at a desk all day, get hold of some support. So whether it's your folded up blanket or a block or a cushion, you pop that underneath the head, drawing the chin in towards the breastbone to release, coming into your Shavasana. And I'm going to talk you through a meditation here. So find yourself in a comfortable position where you can release any effort over the body, the mind. I'm just releasing here and coming back to that sense of Sauca, of the uncluttered, of purification within, clearing the body, clearing the mind. And I'm going to offer you a little meditation here involved in Agni being fire. So I'd like you to visualize your navel, that area of growth, of stability, this midline, this area that we radiate from. And evolutionary wise, that is the area that we radiate from in terms of fetal development. This comes first. So thinking about that area of the gut brain. And I'd like you to envisage that in that area of the body is a tiny flame, a flame that burns. That could be a candle flame or a tiny flame that created a little fire you've created for yourself. And that flame is not affected by the winds of change, but flickering occasionally and burning bright. And that flame is purifying the system. So bring to mind something toxic or unhelpful. Bring that to mind and then throw it into the fire. Throw it into the flame. Release it. Let it burn. Let it be purified by the flame within, the flame of Agni, purifying the system. And then bring to mind self-doubt or uncertainty. and throw that into the fire, throw that into the flame. Let it burn, let that be purified within the flame, within. Always coming back to a still flame burning bright. A still flame burning bright within. And you can let that visualization drop. But at any point, if you want to come back to the sense of Sauca, the Niyama, sense of coming to purification, utilizing heat for that, and we'll look at heat in another Niyama 2 weeks down the line. Tapas, also related to discipline and ardor. A slightly different take on this idea of heat within the body. Know that you can always use this visualization or meditation of the flame. I'm going to give you a few minutes peace to absorb the practice. Acknowledging whatever comes up within your Shavasana, you find relaxation. Whether your awareness drifts, whether your awareness is within the mind, within a specific part of the body, or is radiating throughout the whole of the body, or perhaps your awareness has moved outside of the realms of the body into the space that you're in. Just let that process be without trying to control anything. I'm going to read you a little quote from the Edwin Bryant translation of the Yoga Sutras. In terms of cleanliness, of Sauca, by all means, just let my words roll over you, indeed listening. In terms of ingesting substances, in terms of cleanliness internally, whatever is good or most desired in this life or the next is attained by intense concentration of the mind. Alcohol creates a disturbance in the mind. Those blinded by addiction to alcohol lose sight of their best self-interest. Internal cleanliness consists of purifying the mind of all contamination. The commentators speak of jealousy, pride, vanity, hatred, and attachment as examples of mental contamination. Raja states that internal cleanliness is to be accomplished by benevolence, exuding a friendly attitude towards all. So perhaps the most important take on this sense of Sauca is a sense of unclutterness and moving away from the sense of contamination of the mind. That which is unhelpful, sense of jealousy, pride, vanity, hatred, and attachment as being mental contamination that we can rid ourselves of through a practice of purification. Now, wherever your attention is, bring that back into the extremities, the fingers and the toes, and begin to focus on your inhalation. At the end or beginning of the sound, as it transits through Zoom, I invite you to roll over onto your right hand side in a fetal position. Moving the props, making sure that the space is clear as you roll over to the side, and you can use your arm moving out to the side here to roll the cheek and create support for the sideline of the body. taking your time again after the following sound. Grounding down through the arms and lifting up into an easy cross-legged position, or indeed a kneeling again to finish the practice. Rounding down through sit bones and lifting up through the crown of the head. Excuse me. We're going to inhale the arms up and overhead, following with the gaze. Gathering the hands in through the midline and drawing that energy down to the heart space, bowing in acknowledgement of one another and the space in between. Really take that bow low. Namaste. And the reason why we take a low bow and why you find that in various religions is the effect that has on the nervous system. So a forward fold in that way is innately calming. So I find that quite interesting. Anyway, it's lovely to see you this evening. Next week, it's going to be about